Hey folks, this is Dr. Brian King. Once again in my studio, not on the road. Because I'm not on tour at the moment, I can't get out and about and meet people like I normally do. I am using the internet to bring people into my studio. And today's guest is kind of an interesting one. He's a writer and artist. And he sent me this book all the way from there called Delicate Balance of Reason. It's all about the culture war that has been going on, something that he seems to take a strong interest in. Anyways, folks, please welcome to the show Sean Parker.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and blues. I'm here, I'm there,
Actually, it's Sean B.W. Parker, right?
Yes, that's correct. The BW stands for Benjamin William, which is my given name. I added Sean when I was 20 because of my stammer.
Wow, so you've got four names. Most of us Americans, we're lucky if we get three. So good for you there.
Thank you. It's also three. I just added the first one, so I added one for four myself. It's not because I'm posh. It's because
so you're not really a Sean, or you weren't born a Sean.
I wasn't born a Sean. I was born Ben, and I couldn't say Ben for like my first 20 years. So I had Sean, and I can't say sh anymore. So it's a stammer that I've had since I was 5. I also did a book before this one called Compelling Speech: The Stammering Enigma. I used to be quite a bad stammerer, and I got quite a lot of cultural info on that, and I put that into a TED talk in 2013 and into a book before this. So, but it's in a much better place now.
Interesting. And has that impacted your life at all, especially with your chosen career path?
The stammer was stopped me being a teacher for a long time, and it didn't give me, at school, of course, you get the usual picking onness, and it's terrible because you don't know, you're not capable of doing things that is inside you, like as a communicator type. So and you're always blocking and things. But then when I since COVID, I've become much more out of the shell, and with the promotion of these books and things, and you start to speak in the moment more, which stammerers often have a problem doing. So it's been a 49-year journey, but for the last few years, it's been better.
It's also something that everyone does to some extent. It's just the frequency in which it happens and takes over. I stutter on occasion, as I pause to get a word out or so, but it's for you, it must be much more debilitating, I guess.
Well, yeah, there's the natural hesitations that happen in speech, which is everybody has, and it's normal. And then there's the neurosis of a stammer, which is basically being prepared for the stammer to happen as you grow up, or after an accident. And it's the tension that you can't get a word out that will make the stammer itself. So it becomes a block or a repetition that can't be stopped. And it's a neurotic response as opposed to just a normal casual communication response.
Right. So I was going through this book. Now this book is not it's not autobiographical, and of course it doesn't really address stammering. In fact, it's quite different, I would say. This book touches on, I think, you reference pretty much every aspect of what people call the culture wars, and what's been going on culturally in the English-speaking world. Let's say, I hesitate to say our culture, your culture, but we share a culture to some extent, as we share a language, and so it's the English-speaking world. What brought about this sort of work?
Well, before those COVID years I mentioned, I had been writing about culture more sort of remotely, with Salt in the Milk, 10 years in Istanbul. From when I lived there, I was writing about the culture of Turkey, and then the politics of a book the next year. And I'd always have an eye on what's going on in culture. And then in 2016, things went crazy in the US and in the UK, and everybody's experiencing it. And it's only like after the COVID time and afterwards that I had a chance to reflect on it and go, things were extremely crazy, and we haven't, people have been talking about it and going off batshit in media, but I might as well talk about, because I like to talk about culture in my work, because I prefer to look outwards than to look inwards, and to see what's really going on there. And as I comment on X, on Twitter, and all the rest of it, and follow the relevant, important people, and the Steven Pinkers and things, and seeing their ideas, and putting my I don't like binaries. I don't like absolutes. That's one of the things I don't like, and I don't like even to say I don't like something. Because I don't like a stance, basically. And
you're
that's what
you're very non-committal on anything. That's like, I don't like binaries. I don't like this. I don't even like saying I don't like something. I love that. It's like the shades of gray, even in your appreciation or distaste for other things in our culture.
Yeah, that's spot on. Actually, I do proud fence sitter, simply because the internet world has a market interest in binarizing humanity, and I think a resistance to that is as radical as a thing you can do. Everyone has a need to be radical. I'm not 15 anymore. I'm 49, and that means I'm post-radical, and I want to have actual discussions like this about what's actually going on, not how I'm supposed to furiously fight all the time if I possibly don't have to. Though the culture wars have put the pacifist arguments onto the bonfire, unfortunately, because you're forced to take a stance, you're forced to come out against insanity sometimes, right? And the other side will say you're speaking insane. So trying to go through that I very much like conflict resolution when I can, but so much of the culture wars won't allow that, and the woke set don't allow for conflict resolution. They only accept complete victory, from what I can tell.
So as you're, I guess if you refer to the woke as a they, then that sort of implies that you're on the side that opposes the woke. Is that fair?
That's a gotcha, isn't it? And you're probably right, because because the woke has turned into, we're not going to talk about the original meaning of the word, which I'm very aware of the African American context, and got to take it away from that, because this book got lots of criticism about that. I'm like, I know the origins of the word. I'm talking about woke now, because language moves, and that's a part of the problem. And it's like, yes, I have had to come out on the side of post-woke. I don't like anti-woke because like the anti stuff. I like post-woke because we're after that. And it is only the authoritarian elements in liberalism. In Britain and America, the word liberal has a different impact. Over here, it's still a positive in general. I'm a classical liberal. I'm proud of that. But in America, if you get called a liberal, it has an entirely other Kamala Harris meaning, right? So
right. Yeah, you're a nut job or you're whatever.
Right.
That goes on. So it's interesting to me how much of this is it's heavily influenced by my country, my culture. We're almost 400 million people over here in this little space that we occupy. So it's understandable how much we do influence the rest of the world. But you're over there in England. Yeah, you're talking about language. You guys invented the language. You make the rules. So and then you talk. There's this word woke that became popular in America. And then got distorted. In its meaning. I'm assuming by Americans and how does all this stuff really make its way to affect your life over there?
Well, I suppose it's the motherland of the language. Can't really get away from that. Fair enough. And it's kind of the good thing about English is that it sort of it takes from all over the world, from the British Empire, but the American Empire has replaced that over the last 100 years to all sorts of results. And the more that America questions itself, the less sure I see the world being. So that's another sort of argument. But like if America sneezes, we catch a cold is a very helpful term because it's much bigger, much more powerful, and much more influential. And despite all the protestations of my countrymen, we love and are jealous of America. I am. The openness, the scale, the positivity. Not in every single American, of course, that's ridiculous, but as a cultural norm, we love that stuff. In the 80s and 70s, the things that you imported were absolutely drenched our country happily, you know, Bon Jovi or Knight Rider or whatever else, or Reagan's capitalist ambition. We imported that, went, come on, let's live with this. At the same time that the arguments with the socialists are going on, and I used to identify on the left, you know, coming from that sort of intellectual stock, and there's the journey. And it's only these days, America does run the world without a shadow of a doubt from California, not from New York, you know, from Elon and the Silicon Valley. And that's the ripple, and it goes out eastwards. I'm not complaining about that, especially not with Elon in charge, or very much influential, that's the term. And there are elements of Britain that some of us would like to get rid of, like the royal family and all the rest of it. But you guys seem to have an emotional bond to that too, and that shouldn't just be discarded as nothing, because it's a sense of deep culture, and that's okay. You don't really recognize it when it's on your. I'm not the royalist to do that, but I acknowledge that its importance around the world. You know, soft power is what you mean, isn't it?
Yeah. Now it is definitely interesting, the spread of American culture, because I'll be honest, not me personally, but I understand Americans tend to not pay attention to the rest of the world, you know, and to the point where, you know, people who live in the rest of the world, you know, Americans don't know the language, they don't know this, they don't know that, they don't know anything. Well, Americans don't have to. They're the big fish, you know, and but it is interesting when something when our culture is so I don't know, difficult, or there are changes that take place in our culture that clearly are not good changes. You can see them coming, you can see things happening, and yet this like a tidal wave, it still kind of spreads out, you know, to you guys. And you know, things like again, like this wokeness, or you know, other things that you mentioned in the book. Like why would that matter in England? You know, like BLM started in the United States, you know, and yet there's BLM protests and riots and things happening in England, you know, and you know, why would you have a different history, you have a different culture, and so it is kind of interesting to watch that the spread for good or bad of American culture across the world.
Yeah, I mean, the democratic underbelly is soft. We're very vulnerable, and critical identity theory, which has replaced the Cold War since 1990 gradually, whether it's critical race theory or gender theory, mainly, and then the trans and things like that. And they've got rid of the class aspects because everyone's doing its middle class, so they don't want to go into that too much. And they they are exploiting, those intellectuals are in the media generally are exploiting the unspoken codes that, I'm going to say, white people have to you, and this is not in any way to alienate any non-white viewers. It's just about the fact that the roots liberal democratic values of Britain and America come from a whiteness over 300, 400 years of our parliaments, you know, in one way or another, slowly. And that has a very, there are certain things we don't talk about within that, as in how men and women get together, get on together, have problems and split up and not, and the choices that we make. And they've been able to exploit those choices over the 30 years from whichever angle they want to come through. From, it's a term I heard in 2005 and went, I'm going to watch that, from intersectionality. So it's like, whether it's race or sex or anything else, they will get it into the argument somehow as a power grab. And at first it's all about equality. DEI is the new swear word.
It's another American invention. That's another American export. you know? Yeah, these things are they catching? Like, is DEI something that has been adopted over there?
Yeah, fuck. Excuse my French. It's absolutely rampant. The things that Scott Adams talks about, not being able to have a job for 40 years because of being looked over for diverse people, is absolutely the same here. These ideas are imported because they're effective in pushing through by they don't have to do it in the courts. They just do it through company policy. So it's like that company policy then controls how people are. It exactly emanated from you guys and is adopted. There's a transatlantic trade of American young academic women coming over from the Ivy Leagues, and they come into Oxford, all the best unis they can, and then if they can't get in, they go to one down there. And our unis are full of these young, positive-looking, third-wave for feminist American academics, bringing the ideas, and then they go and get another contracted job in the justice sector or in business, and they bring all those ideas out there, intersectional ideas, and they are absolutely the culture war that we're responding to, that normal Brits are responding to.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It's interesting to think about my experiences over in the UK with in that context, because you guys, in my opinion, are a state that really does accept authority like nobody else. There's I mean, the fact that everywhere you drive, your license plate is scanned, and you go into a parking lot and they know exactly that you're there and who in your car and everything. There's a level of of observation and big brotherness in the UK that we don't have over here, and so I do think that as obedience to authority, or you just take one authority figure just to say, hey, that's a bad idea, and boom, it's over.
You've hit the nail on the contemporary head. Is that absolutely where we are right now? We are realizing because of Elon, Donald, and the entire cultural milieu, how obedient we are. And it's all in order to have a happily getting along society, to the point where people who are upset by an atrocity happening in your country responds to that on Twitter with a tweet that looks like an incite to violence, gets put in prison for 2 years. This happened just this year, just as Keir Starmer came to power. We were like, fantastic, brilliant. That's where we are. The free speech is so. I am very into free speech, and that's I'm right off the fence now, aren't I, Dr. Brian? It's like I can't help it, but it's like, yes, I'm a free speech guy, and we are envious of someone like Mr. Musk being able to challenge Keir Starmer and say, your country's a mess, you need to sort it out. He's quite right, and many of us know that. Even the people that voted for Starmer know that. His estimations are sub-zero, but we are just not as fiercely combative as you guys culturally, so we don't. Well, right now we don't go there because we're not starving. People only revolt when they're starving, and we're not starving, so that's why we're not revolting. But that's up to. That's
a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Hunger drives revolutions. It's not really. It's when you got enough money that you can sip a coffee at Starbucks and you get angry about something you see in your Facebook feed, that's not going to motivate, but when when you got people that can't eat, and they don't feel safe, that's when revolutions happen. But I digress. That sounds like a war, and we're talking about possible war, and that gets me back to this question that I wanted to ask you earlier. What exactly is the culture war? Because I hear this phrase all the time, and it sounds like it has meaning. I think I don't use it necessarily, but I think I understand it on some level, but I've never articulated it. Nobody's ever told me, what the war is, who the sides are, what we're fighting over. What in your opinion, what's the culture war?
Well, it's a media invention, just like everything else. as is woke, that's a hostage from the media, and critical race or critical identity theory is better. These things are all inventions, right? So it's one of those. In order to make a post-print newspaper, internet news more addictive, and the journalists started to realize that people don't really have sort of had enough of party politics. They'll go into it a little bit, but they've kind of had enough of it. That's a 200-year-old story. What this century seems to be all about is identity. So attaching identity to the culture wars. Is it better than people running tanks over each other in Ukraine? Yes, it is. That's what we can say about the culture wars. But are the consequences the same? Yes, they sort of are. So it's like it's a proxy war, like football is, soccer rather. That those things are wars, and they are much supported and loved because of that, the tribalism. And so these are the intellectual ones, and identity theory has brought these things to give idiots like me something to write about, and everybody to get quite. When you see liberal democracy being attacked, the Enlightenment values, that's another thing I stand behind, is Enlightenment values. When you see them being attacked, you can't help but come out and fight for them. So that's the pacifist out the window. If they said tomorrow we're going to make England a Christian puritanical or Islamic caliphate, no choice, Sean. Say, well, no, I'm going to come out and fight for Enlightenment values, I'm afraid. So that's the culture war there being exploited in me, and it's just a way of getting people to engage, I guess, and that's not entirely negative.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I got involved, or maybe not involved, but I got into this discussion maybe about 15, 20 years ago. I'm a stand-up comedian, and comedy was on attack, and it was one of the first forms of art that people were starting to attack and cancel artists on a regular basis. You make a joke that offends somebody, and boom, next thing you know, you're trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons. Your management has dropped you. You're losing gigs here and there. I was never famous enough to be canceled. For some reason, there is this attempt or need to among some people, and maybe they're not organized into like a collected side of the war, but there definitely is this idea that you can alter the mind or the thoughts, or at least the expressed thoughts of other people just by complaining about it, and that evolved into what we see today, I think, in some respects.
Yeah, I'm deeply involved with the comedic the free comedy speeches of of England, like on Headliners, on GB News, things like this, and the Comedy Unleashed type lot. And Mr. Ricky Gervais is a hero of this, of course. And it's like the space of the stage is the one place in society, except for Speaker's Corner, where you can say whatever you want, as humor or as observation or anything else. That's almost sacrosanct. But there's half of that industry or that art is saying, no, you should only use that space for social progress. And if that social progress is punching down, then you're no longer creating art in a way of which I approve. And of course, the good comedians like yourself, I'm sure, says, well, I don't give a shit what you approve of. I'm doing my expressive art, and that's it. Yeah. This book is entirely about that, and in support of all those, comedy is a cathartic experience. You don't have to approve of it. You just have to go, oh, I see what he means. That's where the humor comes. And that's why Ricky Gervais is still selling out millions of things everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting about Ricky Gervais. He's an artist that I don't think I really cared for much until the controversy, because that started to influence what he was producing. And I think he's become, in my opinion, a much more interesting performer as a result of those attacks. So there is some there is some benefit, but of course, he had to weather that and decide what he was going to do, and then there's other people in the non-comedic space, but people like Jordan Peterson, who's had difficulties being an outspoken person, living in a society that's a bit more regulated than the United States, and something that a lot of Americans don't understand is that just north to us is pretty much England, but with tougher rules. And, actually, I don't know. The rules are probably just as tough. Yeah, it's interesting, this world we're kind of dealing with. And so you write books, you create art, it says you've worked as a cultural studies teacher. Do you still teach?
Not much really, except for the fact that Twitter is as educational a tool as any other I've come across for everybody, if you use it in the way that I try to. I was teaching English and cultural studies in Istanbul for 10 years when I lived there, 2004 to 2014, and I was 20. I spent my 30s there, being a musician at night and a teacher during the day. So and all the good times that goes along with that. So that's what I was doing whilst I was out there, and I discovered how English works, as in the mechanics. Became a better speaker despite the stammer through that. And the cultural studies part would be when you're teaching conversation class, you tend to go into subjects, themes, and as opposed to the mechanics of English. And so we would go into the things like we're talking about now, I suppose, but 20 years ago. And at the end of my stay in Istanbul, I did a couple of lectures at Istanbul University on cultural studies type things as a kind of a last hurrah. So, but I haven't really done very much since then, the occasional bit of voluntary teaching, but that was pretty much that part of my life.
When you were in Istanbul, were you just trying to escape?
But I first went out there as an escape from Tony Blair's surveillance culture, which you mentioned earlier on.
Yes, that's a great way to summarize that. I wasn't sure if you guys even understood what I was referring to, because in the United States we just don't have that. We don't. So surveillance culture is a great term for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it started with the CCRCs have been doing a slow cancer across this country, apparently worse in China, but nowhere else, us and China. So that's a great badge of honor. And so it wasn't actually CCTV which sent me out there. It was after 9/11, which affected us deeply, not quite as emotionally as you, of course, but for the 3 years after that, every single day in the news was panic about bombing, panic about Islam. And I started to understand then what news media meant, because the effects weren't around me. They were just in the news. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what's happening in my head here? So I happened to meet some Turkish pals in 2004, started to hang around with them. They all went home. I loved them very much. And so I put these two things together. What's Tony Blair doing? What's this country doing with all this panic? Is that to support some sort of a war that might be about to happen? And all of my actual Turkish friends seem absolutely lovely. A couple were Armenians, a couple were Muslims. So anyway, I went out to see them for a holiday, meant to be a holiday, and just stayed and went after 3 months. And I just carried on being there, thinking, I'm in my 30s, let's spend some time abroad, let's do this, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And I then just did it. So there's a partly an escape, but also partly wanting to just be somewhere else for a while.
Yeah, no, I totally, as someone who travels extensively, I totally understand that desire. I really do. So it wasn't your own personal Brexit to get out there for a little bit.
It's a fair to the tune of 60% was let me get out of fucking Britain for a little while, for sure. But a good 40% was also like wanting to do something positive for. Just to explore as you would, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, getting back to your recent book, how do we win the culture wars, or even if we don't win it, how do we just get out of it?
I think the genie is out of the bottle, and like that term I used, soft underbelly of liberal democracy. I haven't said that before, and I think I might be onto something there with the exploitation that has been exposed by intersectionality. Isn't going to go anywhere, because you and I aren't about to let liberal democracy go, are we? Into true, you've just elected, we know who, but Donald Trump, just in case people don't know, and that means 4 years of very interesting.
I like how you're treating Donald Trump like he's Lord Voldemort. Hey, don't say his name.
Don't say his name. Well, because you never know when you're talking to an American, their response to the two words Donald Trump. Some people lose their shit, and some people are like, "Yeah, he's my best buddy." So you're like, I would quite like him to spend a few years over here running my country, but to say that, Christ knows. But I think we're on safe turf with our audience right now. On my ex, there's very much love for him, and it's it's not about his character; it's about what he stands for, and it's. America has said something about the culture wars 2 months ago. It said DEI is a race to the bottom. We've had enough of what is, might have had its good intentions. We all realize them. And now it's gone somewhere completely different, which is anti-white, and it's anti-male, and it's anti-sanity. And we've imported the same thing over here. And people like me, old liberals like me, are coming out and saying it too, en masse. And it's about time, and it doesn't. And we don't go to violence. We don't get out the Kalashnikovs. We just say we live in an intellectual place where we can speak our minds without being called a racist or anything else. And actually, when you are called these things, they have no effect anymore, because it's so. I think I've been called fascist a few times on X Twitter. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I really don't care, and I don't know anybody that does care anymore, which is kind of interesting itself.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love that you brought up Elon Musk several times. So one of the things that I look forward to in our future is people like Elon Musk, and specifically Elon Musk, having an influence on the way things develop from this point forward. I think one of the pivotal turning points in our history was when Elon bought Twitter. I think that was that should eventually go down in history as an extremely pivotal moment, because it really did shift the tide. It wasn't just some rich guy buying a website that he liked. It was a guy who supports free speech, and so much so that he used the website a lot. He was a very big user of Twitter, and he just happened to have the means to take it over. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was so incredibly rich, none of this would be happening. But he was able to buy Twitter. He was able to reveal to the world, what had been happening in this social media site, where that is absolutely, without a doubt, influenced people's decision making, influenced their behavior, and that's just one social media site. If he were to buy out Facebook and reveal to the world what the Facebook algorithms has been suppressing from them, or has been showing them, or buy out TikTok, things like this, people, there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding how important that moment really was to history. And it wasn't the first thing he did, but it was early in his acquisition of Twitter. He restored Donald Trump to the platform, which I don't, whether or not you like Donald Trump or not, I think is completely irrelevant. A former president of the most powerful country in the world deserves his voice to be heard. Even if he's crazy, even if he's a crackpot who's trying to gather forces to splinter off and create, and fight the federal government and create his own little country. Even if he's like a complete whack job, we need to know what that whack job is thinking, so that we can keep an eye on that whack job. And Twitter said, no, that whack job no longer has a voice with us. And that was it was a weird move. I would say that, getting back to Twitter, that moment might have been sort of the beginning of the end for that particular mindset, because once a move so egregious could be carried out, a lot of people who were on the sidelines were woke to co-opt the phrase back. They were like, wait a minute, you can do that to the president, and I think for me, as a comedian, I was always, cancel culture is terrible. Yeah, and people try that, but whatever. I'm not famous enough to really be affected by that. So it never really occurred to me. But I think I got off the sidelines and started to take an interest in what was happening when Donald Trump got kicked off of Twitter. And then when Elon bought Twitter, I thought that was a great thing. And then eventually Elon brought Donald back to Twitter, or X now. I don't think Trump uses it as much as he used to. But regardless, you can't take away the platform of somebody who's that influential to the world without there being some form of repercussions from the rest of society. If you can silence him, what's going to stop you from doing everything to me, and so I think that became I think that was a fair point in history that really should, if any historians are listening to this podcast 30 years from now, make sure you include that in your books. So Elon went from being a disruptor of industry to being a champion of free speech, and then now in this never really imaginable turn of events is now going to be one of the people who's influencing the direction of our country, and that's interesting. It's neat.
It's like, I think that America has an internal kind of correction system, and perhaps your famous constitution has sort of proved itself over the last few years of it will sort things out like this, because there was a lot of panic about the fact that they would cheat again.
It's been awful. We haven't had a candidate that's really mobilized people, and then this guy, on his third run for president, somehow mobilized a lot of people that hadn't previously voted, and maybe again a lot of us people sitting on the sidelines of the culture war and said, hey, wait a minute, that is crazy. I need to say something with my vote. And yeah, it's interesting. I also see the same thing happening. Excuse me. I also see the same thing happening in other countries. It looks like change is coming in places like Canada, and other countries in the world out there. And I don't know if that's a ripple effect of the coin toss, but it's I can't say that I want to always rely on the randomness of change. I'd like to see that the culture go in the right direction, because it just collectively figures things out. But maybe I'm too optimistic about humanity. I don't know.
But I think that's a good way to be, Brian. I mean, I'd like to think so too. I mean, I certainly try to be. But I do get a sense that the mainstream, the international mainstream, Western mainstream, is going against the global view at last, and that's not a call for every country in the world to be populist and nationalist strongholds. Doesn't quite need to be like that, but to sense how power can work when like the one world government thing used to, perhaps in the 90s and stuff, to me sound like a great sort of idea for people being having the right values everywhere. And we've seen what the reality of that might be, like with the WEF, World Economic Forum and all that sort of thing. You can see, without having to go down conspiracy rabbit holes, just by looking at political science, how that kind of hegemonic power is a danger, and how it has its how you need the individual. The individual is a very powerful thing. It beat Russian communism after 50 years of that. The individual spirit of David Hasselhoff beat Boris Yeltsin, Gorbachev. Do you know what I mean? That feeling is important, and so I'm not I'm a newcomer to the individualist ethos, and I don't have either way on capitalism. I'm not an economist-minded guy, but seeing what the global hegemony wants to do, I am all up for the individuated by you and Donald Trump and Elon Musk and me. That guy and that woman is important.
Yeah. Well, I can only hope that things do turn out like I think they're going to, or at least change in the way that works out for everybody, in the greatest good. And then we can find some other thing to complain about or fight about. Well, this is your 9th book. The other 8 books, I'm assuming, are not about culture wars.
Not about the culture wars as explicitly as this one, not about the conversation about it that's going on. They're more about observations of that particular year and the places that I've been at that time. Istanbul, the Sussex coast, the venue I was running, that sort of thing. And I was kind of trying to capture the things that I was doing at that time, like diaries. And okay. But the last 2, Compelling Speech and this one, are much more conceptualized things. So yeah, this one's explicitly about that because I thought I might as well come off the fence and say I might want to talk about this stuff properly, not just kind of capture everything I'm going through, which the other ones are more like.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're a man of ideas and thoughts, and I'm glad you found an outlet to get some of those out to the world. Hopefully people will check you out. Speaking of checking you out, how can people find you?
Thank you. If they go to anywhere online and go Sean B.W. Parker, as it says there, they'll get either my books or my X. Is very lively. Thanks to Elon, I've got 12,000 followers on there and we have a great time. Ricky Gervais shared my portrait of him last week to his 14 million followers.
Well, there you go. That's something to put on the resume. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've become a big deal to his people, which is rather cool for our little podcast here. If they go out there and put my name in, they can find whichever. I've got a couple of albums out there on Spotify too, if they want to have a listen. About to release a new one. Very
cool. All right. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you taking time out of your day over there. And where I said you were in the UK because I wasn't sure if you shared with me what city you're in. Are you in London?
I'm not in London. I'm an hour and a half away on the south coast in a town called Worthing in Sussex.
All right, Sean. I appreciate it, man. Everybody who was watching or listening, thank you guys. I appreciate you. And check out Sean, as he mentioned, Sean B.W. Parker on the internet. And this has been another episode of On the Road with Dr. Brian. Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and blues. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere.